Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the next of the sessions on the ARP, Applied Research Project. The intention of tonight's session is really to get you remotivated, re-enthused, to get you back on track and to get things moving. The first thing that we're going to be doing is actually going through the document that I've given you, where, if those of you that have arrived late, if you can make sure you've got 2 copies of the Acknowledgement of Responsibilities. Now, the reason for that, for this document, is that a lot of processes have changed literally over the past 3 months, and that's been a large reason for the delay. As you've probably picked up in some of your courses, when an organization goes through transition, there's only so much you can do within existing structures and with existing resources to improve on that and to increase capacity. And when it gets to a point where you've done as much optimization as possible, you actually have to do some redesign. And that's what actually happened. So what we've got here is your responsibilities as going forward over essentially the next 8 months. So the idea is that we want everybody to know what their responsibilities are. So you've got responsibilities, supervisors have responsibilities, I've got responsibilities, my program coordinator for research, Sumaya Ali, has got responsibilities, faculty officers got responsibilities. And what we've done is we've got a full matrix of responsibilities, and we just want everybody to know what they are. And so it might appear a little bit kind of school marmish to have to sign off on stuff, but we really want everybody to acknowledge that they've taken cognizance of and will take responsibility for each of the steps in the process. The first half of this evening, I'm actually going to go through step by step what the process is from here going forward, so that there's no misunderstanding. Because a few of the things that I've spoken to you about previously have changed, all right? And particularly, obviously, deadlines, because we've missed deadlines. The majority is exactly the same as we spoke about previously. But I don't want there to be any ambiguity about it whatsoever. All right, so maybe what we should do is talk through it, and if there are any unanswered questions about how we're going to deal with things or how we have dealt with things, then we can take those and then we'll have a very short break before we go into some content. If you read the Senate Standing Orders on Higher Degrees, is that under exceptional circumstances you may apply, provided you apply 6 weeks in advance of the deadline, you may apply for an extension. That extension may or may not be granted. So your deadline is the 28th of February. Yeah, all right? Full stop, because after that your registration expires. As I say, under extraordinary circumstances, there might be permission granted for you to submit late without penalties. Right? You submit late, otherwise you have to pay fees for the following year. Okay, so that's, just to clear that up, 28th of February is your deadline.
Given our situation with the restructuring and everything, all the process changing, will that not be considered with potential extensions?
You've got approximately, 8 months, all right, to do this. The magnitude of what you're doing is equivalent to approximately 2 courses, all right? 8 months to do the equivalent of 2 courses is more than adequate. You could do this project in 2 or 3 months, quite comfortably. You've got 8 months. So I don't think that that's going to be a strong argument to get an extension. The point is that it's 250 hours. You need to find 250 hours over the next 8 months. All right, that is enough time. That's an hour a day roughly. Come February, you will have justification for applying for an extension. You will always able to apply for an extension. Whether it gets granted or not, I can't say. That would be up to the assistant dean. But I'm just saying that the argument is going to be a weak one, I feel, because you have so much time to do it. It is equivalent to 2 courses, which you would normally cover within 1 quarter. And the point is that you're already halfway through the sessions. You've already had the introductory sessions, where we'll be talking about all of the aspects of the literature review and the problem statement and the scoping and the evaluation criteria. So you've had all of that, all right? So that time is not wasted. If you don't make your the February deadline, all right, and you go into the following the following academic year, it will have financial implications. It won't be that you won't graduate, it won't be that you'll fail, but it will have financial implications. All right. And the longer you spend on it, the less likely it is that you will complete it. All right. So if you want to spend more time on it, it's going to cost you money and you're less likely to finish. If you want to go that route, that is your prerogative. It's not advised.
Yeah. No. So can we get a formal letter from the university explaining the situation so that we can give our sponsors that so if we had to overrun, they are fully aware of what should happen and why this course was delayed?
Well, we could certainly give that, but it's going to say that you had plenty of time to do the project. It's not going to then say that that you needed extra time. I would not have postponed those lectures if it was not going to be possible to complete it within the same period of time. So the idea of this document is that you understand the process and you accept the process and you accept that there are some consequences that you would be responsible for if you don't meet. So the first thing is that you're responsible for being registered and having all your fees paid. If you haven't registered, you're not entitled to be sitting in the classroom and you're not entitled to supervision. All right, so that's why we need to get the forms sorted out, and if you haven't submitted those forms, please do so electronically, and we will process those. You can always change your registration. If you say that you're going to do a consulting project and you want to change to a research article, it's just a case of filling in the form again, that's all. So it's not that it's casting concrete. But you do need to. We need to know what you're doing, and we need to know that you're duly registered. Okay. Right, the next thing. You must submit your topic and project details onto that supervisory system and update them if and when there are changes. Now, I need that information in order to allocate you a supervisor. So if you haven't got a supervisor yet, it's because you haven't given me the information, or you hadn't by around about middle of this week when I downloaded the information. So therefore, my hands are tied. I cannot allocate a supervisor to you until you have filled that information in. So everybody that has filled the information in should have a supervisor unless you did it in the last day or two. It takes me about a day to do the process of allocating for a cohort. Now, unfortunately, not everybody's filling in the stuff. So I've done one batch about 2 weeks ago. I did another batch this week. I want to leave it until, I don't want to do another 4 or 5 people and another 4 or 5 and another 4 or 5. So the sooner you do it, the better. So I'll probably do another batch in about a week or so's time, a week, maybe 10 days time. All right? But it literally takes me about a day to do all the matrix and that sort of thing to do the allocations. So that's kind of the turnaround time. But I really need you guys to take responsibility for doing this, because if you don't do it, and if a lot of you don't do it, it will hold up the entire process, because it's quite intense. It's not an automated process. It's not like there's a system which simply churns out a result. Okay, I need to go through the matching process, and there's a number of criteria which I apply in order to match you. In order to approve a topic, it's got to go through a full review process, and that only happens once you've done your proposal. We can't evaluate just on the basis of a title. So no, it doesn't imply approval at all. Okay, and you can change it, of course. Okay, this process is at this stage is simply for allocating a supervisor. But the point about updating it if there are changes is also really important, because we will in due course be using that same information to allocate you an examiner. All right, so if you do change, we need to know. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to give you an appropriate examiner. And that could compromise your evaluation. So you take responsibility for that. It's not something that I'm going to go through your final submission and do a check and to see that the examiner is appropriate. I will take it on the basis of what's on the database. Okay, you have to understand that, please, guys. I've got over 500 MBA students alone that I'm trying to manage here, and I cannot do it individually. I need the systems to work. I need you to take responsibility for your part in this. Yeah.
When should our final updates and submissions be made before handing in? Because I'm sure if there might be tweaks along the way. So should it be done by the end of February if we're handing in at the end of February?
No. So those updates you're talking about.
Yes.
All right. When you submit your proposal, that's the point at which your project is essentially cast in stone.
Okay.
And that's the point at which I will allocate an examiner. All right, because then we need to flag the examiners and that sort of thing to say examination coming down the line. So at that point where it's approved, that's when you need to make sure that it's up to date. Okay, so there should not be any fundamental shifts after your proposal. You're responsible for managing the relationship with your supervisor. Now, what I mean by that is you need to negotiate, you need to agree, you need to discuss how you're going to work together. All right. I can't manage that. Everybody's an individual. Your needs are different from anybody else's. Your supervisor's availability is going to be different from others. Some of you might have overseas supervisors, all right? So you're going to be relating in a different way from others. You need to manage that process, please.
What happens if the supervisor doesn't respond? So that I think you allocated me a supervisor beginning of the week, and within hours of receiving your email, I emailed them and tried to find out, introduce myself and find out when we can meet. I still haven't got a response. So in that case, what do I do? Do I phone him up? Because I think there's only his email that's attached to your introduction email.
Okay. If you have a problem like that, it's not impossible, and it's not. I can't guarantee that they will be available and they will cooperate. Right. But when I say that you need to manage that, I had one student who sent an email, didn't get a reply, and 8 weeks later came and told me he'd got a new supervisor. That's a problem, all right? You need to follow up. If you need a phone number, I might have one. You can contact me and ask for that. But don't, some of us, and I'm sure some of you in that position where you don't actually reply to every single email that comes into your inbox due to oversight and workload and so on. That can happen with supervisors as well. They're only human. So please, guys, follow up with them. Internal supervisor, it will depend on their workload and PhD supervisions. I am not allocating any more than 3 students to an external supervisor at this stage. In other words, a sessional supervisor, somebody that's not on the permanent staff here. Internals will take on more. It might be 10, might be 8, might be 12. It depends on their workload and what's agreed with management. I do know that there is a problem sometimes with responding. Okay. And I need to know about that, if that is what's happening. Sending one email and not getting a reply does not constitute kind of a breach on the part of the supervisor. That's all I'm saying. All right. The next bullet point here is if you are going to change supervisor, then it has to be done by agreement. And it's the 3 parties need to be involved. All right. The external supervisor or the supervisor who's not cooperating potentially needs to be informed. All right. A new supervisor, which you may or may not have sourced for yourself, and myself have to be involved. And that's where the school's responsibility comes in. It's for me to manage the process. All right? And I do. What you can't do is just dump your supervisor and move somewhere else. Okay? That's not acceptable because a supervisor that has been appointed has a reasonable expectation of a contract and payment. Okay? Now, if they've been in breach of that, that's fine. We will deal with that. But that's not something that I'm going to deal with because I don't have the background. You need to be able to say to a supervisor, this is not working for me. All right? If it's out of their area, if they're not giving you the sort of feedback that you're needing, if they're not responding in the way that you've agreed, all right? That's something that you need to be professional about and engage with them, and come to me then once that is done. All right, that's what I'm saying. I will manage that process. That is the school's responsibility, but I can't manage everybody's engagement with their supervisor. Does that answer the question? Okay, you're comfortable with that. All right, but please, guys, this one is one that's tripped us up a number of times. Where students have dumped supervisors and moved to somebody else, and then we've created an expectation amongst 2 people that they'll both be supervising one student, and in some cases a contractual obligation, and that becomes really problematic. So that's why I'm saying manage the relationship. If it's not working, that's when, having done that, you need to come to me and we'll make another plan. The next bullet point there is that when it gets to the final version of your proposal, Now, what I mean by that is that you're going to be exchanging drafts probably with your supervisor, and you're going to maybe be submitting onto Sakai to check for plagiarism and so on. But when you get to the point of having your final version, you need to take responsibility for loading that up onto Sakai, and you are responsible for making sure that there's no plagiarism. All right, so that's not the supervisor's job. It's not, you're responsible for making sure it's the final version, not your second final draft. All right, you need to make sure that the right version ends up on Sakai. You also need to then, the next bullet point, to send that to your supervisor. All right, the final version that you want evaluated, the final version of your proposal. So when you feel that you've got a proposal that is ready for evaluation, it goes to Sakai, it goes to your supervisor, and a copy to myself, or to Samaya actually. All right. Now the reason it goes to Samaya is so that we know that you've sent it to your supervisor, because at that point the clock starts ticking for the supervisor. All right, the supervisor will have essentially 10 days to 2 weeks to turn around and a formal evaluation of your proposal. So they've been giving you feedback up to now, but the formal evaluation is then done at this point. Right. So that's why it goes to both places.
So what do you mean formal evaluation? You say they do not mark us, we've got an external examiner. So what does the formal evaluation?
Okay, the external examiner is for the final project, the project report. We're talking about the proposal now.
Oh,
okay. There are two important milestones. The one is the proposal. The other is the final submission. All right. So I'm talking proposal still at this stage, which the supervisor does evaluate. The supervisors have been instructed that if they don't feel sufficiently familiar with the topic and with your methodology, then they must refer you to a member of the staff, or a member of the faculty, staff of the business school. So they're not going to set up an appointment. You need to then come to me if it's methodology, or one of my colleagues, Terry Carmichael, or if it's economics, you can go to Dr. Horn or Prof. Schelling or somebody like that to get the detailed technical input, if you're referred by the supervisor. Yeah.
So by evaluate, does the supervisor allocate you a mark for the proposal?
Yes, that is correct. The evaluation is carried out according to a very strict rubric. All right, so there's very detailed criteria. There's 10 criteria that are evaluated against it. So your supervisor is not necessarily going to advise you on every single item in that list. All right, so you still are responsible for that final submission. All right, so the quality of that final submission is your responsibility.
I haven't done research before, so I'm relying on their expertise, and they know what makes a great proposal. So why would they, let's say for example there's 10 criteria, why would he give me 6 instead of just telling me what I need to do so I can do a good job?
Well, because not everybody's capable of getting distinctions for every piece of work that they do. Doesn't matter how much guidance they give.
It's just about telling me you need to make sure that you've done this, this, and this, because that's what you will be evaluating.
No, but you'll know that. You've already got those evaluation criteria. Okay, they're in the process document that has been circulated on Sakai. So you know what you've got to deliver.
Okay.
All right. So the question is, how well have you delivered on that? Okay, and that's up to you. Okay, they will ask you questions like, where have you demonstrated integration of your theory base? All right, and to make sure that you have done that. You might have done that very well. You might have done it only adequately. Okay, so that's how they're going to mark you on it. All right. The supervisor might say, no, hang on, I'm not interested in getting 3 dozen drafts for every section. All right, submit me a first final draft, and I'll give you feedback, and then you give me the final one. That you must manage. People work differently, and we're not specifying exactly how it should be done, because that would be unreasonable and unprofessional probably. Having submitted that to your supervisor for evaluation, you then need to make sure that you complete the ethics clearance form, which is an electronic document. It's on Sakai, and that will need to be signed by your supervisor. All right, there's an ethics clearance form. It's a 3-page document. and it's set up in such a way that it checks all the relevant information is in place. So you are responsible for that. So you probably will need to get it printed out or sent to your supervisor to get their signature on it. We require your signature on it, guys. All right? It is no good to have an ethics clearance document without the declaration that the information is correct. Okay, we can't give you ethical clearance unless you've made that commitment. There's a similar document, well, it's similar as in it also needs your signature and your supervisor's signature, and that is the formal signing off of the relationship between the two of you. All right, and that's the statement of principles of postgraduate supervision. So you are also responsible for that document. If you haven't already done so, you also need to do the plagiarism comprehension test. All right, so that has to be put in place as well. Once your supervisor has evaluated your proposal, he or she needs to give you feedback and needs to give you the evaluation form. So, all right, so they need to give you the evaluation against the rubric with any additional comments plus a mark. They need to give you that form because you then need to submit those 4 forms, all right, 4, through to my office, through to Sumaya. So the 4 forms being the evaluation, which has come from the supervisor, the ethics clearance form, which is signed by the supervisor, the statement of postgrad supervision, which is signed by the supervisor, and the plagiarism test, which, if it's not already with Sumaya. All right, so 4 documents, you are responsible for that. Now, the point is that if you remember, I said that you need to copy Sumaya on when you send that through to your supervisor. 2 weeks after that, we will expect to have those 4 documents with us. If we don't, we're going to follow up with you as to why. All right, and we'll follow up with you and your supervisor because you've got joint responsibility for that. So, from our perspective now, we've now got on Sakai, we've got your proposal, and we've got your 4 documents that have come through to Sumaya. I will have checked for plagiarism in that time. All right, so I've got that window. I will check through for any plagiarism. If there is evidence of plagiarism, we will then obviously invoke the disciplinary process or the normal process. Provided there's no issue with plagiarism, those 5 documents, all right, so in other words, the 4 that you submitted plus the one that you went on to Sakai will go through to the faculty office. All right, now, the point is that if it has not got all 5 documents plus being clear of plagiarism, it will stay with us. It won't go through the faculty office. That will mean that you will not be allowed to submit your final report. Okay. So in other words, if you haven't got all of those documents in place, or if there's plagiarism, you will not be able to submit your final report. Faculty office will need that pack of documents, that folder, go through as an electronic folder, and otherwise it will block the process. So you see how important it is that you get all of those documents in, and the reason we've given the responsibility to yourselves is that supervisors, we've found, it's not that big a deal to them. Right, so it could sit on their desk or in their inbox, whereas it's important for you. So it's reasonable to give you the responsibility because you're going to chase up if there's a problem, and so that's how we're doing it. Is that part of the process? That's the most immediate thing that you're going to be facing. All right, that's a critical time, and where a lot of things have gone wrong in the past. It's 4 forms that you've submitted, plus the proposal that was on Sakai. That's what makes 5 that goes through to the faculty office. Okay, 4 plus 1 makes 5. Yep. All right. Now, once that process is in place, all right, we will contact you from time to time, and it depends on kind of what the deadlines are on the various cohorts. Probably once every 2 to 3 months, we will contact you for a progress report. So the first progress report will probably be sometime early in October. And we want to know at that point whether everything is going smoothly. And it'll be a very brief kind of reply to an email saying, yes, I saw my supervisor a week ago, or I haven't seen him in 3 months and I'm really worried. That will enable me to follow up on any problem areas. Okay, so we're trying to provide you with support. Just to pick up on your point earlier, we're trying to play our part in making sure that this process runs smoothly. Rather than just abandoning you for the 8 months of this process, we want to keep track of that. Okay, so you will be contacted from Sumaya, and please then respond to her just with an update on your progress. Assuming everything goes smoothly, you're going to then get to a point of now having your final report ready. So everything else is in place. You will have got a letter from the faculty office during this time, assuming your documents went through to the faculty office with everything clear, and you would have been told if they weren't. But your topic, your title, your supervisor, examiner, and everything will go through to the postgrad committee. It'll get approved. So you'll have a letter to say that it's been approved. You then do the work. Well, you can actually get on with the work in the meantime anyway, because you've got your ethics clearance signed off by then. You now are facing your final submission. So you're responsible then for putting that onto Sakai. All right, so you need to put your final version onto Sakai. So I've said the 18th of September is the date that we would expect you to be submitting your proposal. That is a soft deadline. Now what I mean by that is there's no penalties for going over that deadline, except for the fact that you're going to run late. Okay, that's the problem, is that if you miss that deadline, then obviously the approval is going to be delayed, and then potentially you will be under more pressure for the final submission. So no mark penalties or anything, and we're not going to deregister you. We obviously are going to follow up and find out why, but that's why I say it's a soft deadline. It's between you and your supervisor. If you want to submit early, you're welcome to. All right, but that's the timing that we would see as reasonable. It's set to be at the end of the sort of the break between the third and the fourth quarters. All right, so it's after any exams that you might be writing. But I hear that some of you are traveling during that break, so that might compromise it. But that's why we've set that date. It means that by the end of September, beginning of October, you should have your approval, which gives you 5 months to do the actual work, the project itself. That's how it's been set up. Okay. So you submitted your final report onto Sakai. There's a form called the Supervisor Acquiescence Form, which you then need to submit to your supervisor, who will sign that form. That form then comes through to me. All right, now at that point, that flags for me that there's a submission there that I need to check for plagiarism again. All right, so I need that form, otherwise it won't be checked for plagiarism and it won't go through for examination. Okay. You see how important, again, it is. Yeah.
But isn't the plagiarism being checked by Sakai? Okay.
I check for plagiarism.
Okay.
All right. Sakai will help me in highlighting it potentially, but I check for plagiarism. It's a human process. It's not an automatic process. Okay. All right, so again, the forms are important. At the same time, you need to submit some forms to the faculty office, things like library clearance and various other things. Okay, and the examination process will only begin when that's in place. We've had it before where a student has submitted his research report as it was then onto Sakai. 2 months later, he says, "Why haven't I got my marks yet?" And faculty office says, "Well, because we didn't know that you had submitted. How were we meant to know that you've submitted?" All right, the documents that you're submitting through me and directly to the faculty office, those are what trigger the examination process. The examination process does not begin until such time as faculty office has those documents, because they can't go onto Sakai every day and check to see whether one more person has loaded it up, and they wouldn't even know if that's the final version. The only way they know is when you submit the documents saying, "I have now submitted my final report ready for examination." Okay, so please understand that. You've got 3 submissions in total by default. If you need another one, just let us know, we can extend that. Okay. Right. Your final report will not be sent for examination if any of those documents are outstanding or if their fees are outstanding. Faculty office manage that, and they manage the fees issue as well. So their instruction is that they to you as students, that if you owe fees to the university, the rules of the university say that your research will not be sent for examination.
What does it mean?
It means that until such time as you've paid your fees, it will sit on Sakai and they won't send it for examination. So you've now submitted the final report. It's the last thing you need to complete before you complete the degree. All right. You can't graduate anyway without your fees being paid. So they will hold it up at that point. As an administrative process. I'm communicating to you that faculty office who administer the examination process will not submit it for examination if there are outstanding fees. Now, obviously, if you've come to an arrangement in terms of repayment or acknowledgement of debt, I don't know. I'm not involved with that part of the university. But their rules and regulations are that the research will not be sent for examination unless the fees are paid. Graduation is in July, normally. Yeah. Okay. So the examination process, it varies, all right, depending on the availability of the examiners. Usually it takes about a month. All right. If you don't pay your fees, it delays the process. And the faculty office have asked that you acknowledge that it will delay the process. That's all. The matter of the fees and the examination, that has always been in place. That's not new. All that we're doing is putting it down on paper and asking you to acknowledge that you understand that that is the rule. That's all. And if you don't, if you disagree with the rule, please acknowledge that that is the rule and take it up with faculty. I don't see what else we can do.
With regards to the research article.
Yeah.
So I submit my proposal, it gets evaluated. That's the first grading. Second grading is the final examination, given that my fees are paid. With the research article, so if I can't submit into a journal, does that contribute to a mark or whatever the case? Nothing at all. Okay. So
absolutely nothing.
Okay.
The publication of the research article is a completely separate issue that happens between you, an arrangement between you and your supervisor and the school after the examination process.
So we don't even have to consider submitting?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
You don't have to submit the article. You have to submit for examination something that is in the format of an article that is prepared and ready for submission.
Okay.
But if you choose not to, that's your business. There's no obligation to. We would like you to. It's a good thing for your CV, but no, there's no obligation. It's submitted in the format of a journal article. That's okay. The 12 to 15,000 word document in the format of a journal article, targeted at a specific journal, which then specifies the target audience, the format, the layout, the contents, and so on. All right. That's what you need to submit as a completely separate exercise. All right. After the examination process, you can build in the comments of your examiner into your document if you want to submit it to the journal. Your supervisor can write some of it because he or she's going to be a co-author. All right, but that's separate from the examination process. By then, you've got your degree, you've qualified. Okay. Let's say you target the South African Journal of Business Management. They have a certain readership, they have a certain layout, they have certain expectations of what will be in an article that gets published in the South African Journal of Business Management. So the idea would be that you then you write your applied research project in the format of an SAJBM article. Okay. Once it's been examined, if you then want to submit it, you might have to trim it down because of their page length or their word count might be different. Or so you might want to build in comments from your supervisor. You might want to build in comments from your examiner. So you can re-edit it and submit it as a completely separate process. Okay, we're not going to be part of that, except for the affiliation of the university. All right, but that's something that you and your supervisor will do if you want to go ahead and get it published, which, as I say, is very good for your CV. We would almost certainly pick up the publishing fee of that, okay, as part. So we wouldn't expect you to pick up the fee for that, no. So the separation between the examinable submission for your MBA and what actually goes to the journal editor, I mean, they're two different documents. Obviously, what goes to the journal editor is now going to be based on what you've done, but it's not going to be the same document exactly, no, not necessarily. It cannot be guaranteed that you will make and qualify for a specific graduation ceremony. So obviously we are targeting for you submitting in February the July graduation, but there are any number of reasons that might crop up that might delay that graduation. So you are not guaranteed. We will do everything in our power to get everything sorted out and through by then. But as I say, there are any number of reasons why that might be a problem. So there is not a guarantee. Okay, so let's say that there's revisions. All right, maybe major revisions. Okay, those would typically be expected to take, I think you're given 3 months for that. So they just don't get completed in time. That's would be a very typical reason. A major revision would be where there's a substantial flaw. Essentially, it's a fail, and you're given a second opportunity to submit. Typically, that would be where the student has not worked adequately with the supervisor. And that happens. And through no fault of the, you guys are not all perfect, hey? There are occasions where a supervisor will get that acquiescence form. All right, this is absolutely the case. We'll get that acquiescence form, and at that point, now this is the final form, all right? And they will not have met the student at that point, because the student will not have actually shown the initiative and gone and met the supervisor. You'll be surprised how often that happens. Okay, those are typically the situations where there are major revisions. As long as you do the extension within the time granted, all right, that is revisions based on your previous registration. If you don't meet that and you still want to submit, you would then have to re-register. Yes. Right. Another situation that might cause you not to graduate is if there's a pending disciplinary case against you. All right. So there's another example that might delay your graduation. Okay. So if there is evidence of plagiarism and that case has not been heard and has not been finalized, your graduation would be put on hold at that point.
So if there is a case, what's the expected reasonable time to resolve the case? It can't be open-ended.
Again, that's completely uncertain in the sense that the process can be delayed. I mean, we've just processed a student that took over 2 years to process because the student engaged legal counsel who delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and so it was 2 years that it took to process it. So I can't guarantee that, and it's in the hands of the legal office at that stage anyway. So the lawyers the lawyers talk to one another, and they can take an age. So there's no way that we can guarantee a turnaround time on that. Okay, I mean, you would be informed as soon as the school picks up a problem, and the process is fairly straightforward at that point. I mean, if it's picked up when I review it, all right, we do a markup of the documentation, we convene a school plagiarism committee meeting, and that can normally be done within about 2 weeks or so, and you would be informed that there was a problem if the school was going to then refer it through to the legal office. So you would know very soon if that was going to be a problem. It might be that they say that they give some punishment and you can proceed as is. It might be that you've got to redo your proposal or your project, wherever it happens to be. Again, it depends on the merits of the case, and that depends on the actual committee that hears the disciplinary case. By the time you get the mark for your final report, it's gone through an examiner, it's gone through a moderation process. It will, if there was a discrepancy at any stage, it might have gone through to a discrepancy evaluation, and it's gone through the marks committee. All right. Now, if you feel that you want to get it reviewed, okay, there's nothing in the university provisions for a remark. Your final mark is your final mark. What can happen is that you will get awarded a final mark subject to your making some minor revisions. All right, so that's a very common phenomenon that you maybe will be awarded 76% subject to making certain corrections to the satisfaction of your supervisor. So you don't get that option. It's at the examiner's discretion to award you those minor revisions. And very typically, if a student does a really good piece of work, but there's some minor flaws, one would award the good mark on the basis that let's give the student the opportunity of upgrading it to that final mark, rather than awarding a lower mark and just having it fixed at that point. So, but you don't have, it's not your prerogative to ask for that. Okay. What's in that document and what's in the template for the proposal, it's exactly verbatim what goes to the examiner. All right, so we are hoping that there won't be any major anomalies around that. And the last bullet point there, that you're responsible for submitting final documentation. So once your report has been examined and you get your mark, you then have to submit final versions. All right, so the final versions are after you've made any of those minor corrections. I think there's one bound copy is needed, and there's various documents that go through. And you can't graduate until you've done that. So you might have passed, but unless you submit a final version, you won't actually go through to graduation. All right, so just to know that even the final submission there's kind of two steps in the process. One for examination, and then one after examination once everything has been sorted. I think what faculty office do is they give you a grade, and then they give you your mark once you've got your final documents in. I think that's the way they do it. So they tell you that you've passed. Now please submit your final documents, and then you get your mark. I think that's the way they do it.
The research proposal, see the one that's on Sakai was updated on the 24th. Is that the one we're using? The template, the proposal.
The template for the proposal is the one, it's not the one that's got chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. It's got section headings. It's got the evaluation criteria. That's the one that you should be using. It's a very flexible, very open-ended one. In terms of expectation, all the academic requirements, the criteria haven't changed. The only thing that has changed is a few things around the process, particularly around in fact, the only place it's changed is around the proposal approval. The point is you can change your topic in conjunction with your supervisor up until the proposal is approved. At this stage, those topics and the disciplines and the methodologies are simply to allocate a supervisor. If your topic changes, that's fine. If you do it in collaboration with your supervisor and he or she is still happy, that's 100%. All right? If you change it to the point that your supervisor is no longer happy to supervise, I need their agreement, and then you need to come to me for a new supervisor. If it changes to such an extent that the original supervisor I allocated to you is no longer able to supervise, you're going to have to come back to me to get a new one.
Right.
But I want that to be done with the agreement of the supervisor. I don't want you just to drop the supervisor and come to me for a new supervisor. I need to know that you have taken responsibility for discussing that with the supervisor and getting his or her agreement.
When it's a proposal, my understanding of a proposal is this is what I would like to do and this is how I will do it. So there's still that room to say, no, you haven't approached it the right way or whatever.
No, there's still the opportunity to require you to resubmit at that point. So you might have submitted your final version.
Yeah.
The evaluation might say, no, this is not yet up to scratch, there's not enough detail or something like that. You need to resubmit. I think I can't foresee the situation where, having worked with the supervisor for the last 2.5 months, that they then turn around and say, no, this topic is useless. Surely they would have noticed that sooner than that. But a resubmit is a possibility.